Hey there, welcome to our Men's Ministries online forum. We hope that you've been helped by our first two sessions on transparency and spiritual leadership in the home. If you're watching tonight because you saw one or both of those first two sessions, would you take 5 seconds and share this video to your timeline right now? I'll wait. That helps us get this content in front of just as many people as possible, and we appreciate you doing that. Now, I believe the men that you've seen and the content they've brought in these first two sessions have been top notch. But we don't have any intention of letting off the gas in these last two times we have together either. Tonight, we have an excellent session on a topic that is near and dear to me, work-life balance. For all of my adult life, I've continually found myself wishing for more hours in a day as I've tried to wear all the different hats that have been presented to me. If only I had more time to be the husband and dad I feel I should be. Or I wish I had more time to invest in the church. Or if only these responsibilities would let up so I can invest in my business or spend time with friends or develop a hobby or help a neighbor. The list goes on and on. And I've come to realize I'm not the only one who wrestles with this. Most of us men do. Now, I won't tell you that watching this session tonight will give you 36 hours in a 24-hour day, but I believe it will give you a bit of a method and maybe a touch more sanity as you navigate the time God has given to you. We're indebted to Brother Greg Wilhelm for the great teaching that you're about to see. And when he finishes, I'm going to check in with a few guys and get their thoughts on this teaching and topic as well. Here we go. Let's dig into the work-life balance.
Well, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining with us online today. And I just want to first say thank you to Brother Rody in the Illinois District Men's Department for allowing me this opportunity and really for providing this ministry to the men of the Illinois District and to anyone else who may see that as well. So thank you, Brother Rody, for this opportunity. He has asked me to speak on the subject of the work-life balance. And really the balancing act of work, ministry, being a father, being a husband, etc. So a little about me. My name is Greg Wilhelm, and I am the husband of one. Been married for 20 years now, and I'm a father of three. I have a 17-year-old, a 12-year-old, and by the time you see this, I'll have an 11-year-old as well. So girl, boy, Madison, Olivia, and Wrigley. Some of you may know them. Ministry, I serve currently at the First Apostolic Church of Aurora. I serve as the executive pastor there. Previously held the role of lead pastor in Quincy, Illinois, and then before then served in various roles in Bloomington, Illinois. Also served previously on the Illinois District Board as a presbyter, and has also served in the youth ministry, youth division of the Illinois District as a sectional youth director, youth secretary, youth president, and even served as a regional youth president for the general youth division just a few years ago. But beyond my home life and personal life and ministry life, I am also bivocational. I work a full-time job. I am a team lead manager at it's a software company called Breeze. It's a church management software. Some of you may be familiar with that. It is a remote position. So we're a company of about 50 employees, and I lead or manage a team of 16 of those 50 employees across the nation, literally from Florida to California, all the way up into New Jersey, and everywhere in between. So, but I do manage that team on the support side. So if you have Breeze and you ever called, that's my team that you're working with there. So I said all of that to say this: my life is a little busy. It's a little crazy. It's hectic at time. Juggling family, 3 children with 3 different needs and paths and passions in life. Of course, I'm married. I serve at a church. I work a full-time job. And then obviously outside of that, there's other things like hobbies. I like to golf. I like to hunt. There's, a number of things I like to do. I've got chores to do around the house. I mow the lawn, and I squash spiders and cook out, and I do stuff around the house. Fitness, trying to get to the gym to play racquetball, and some of these other things, as well as just socializing, being with friends and family, very important. And then last but not least, I sleep. At least I try to. So and I want to talk about a lot of these things tonight. I know I've got about 15, 20 minutes here, so I may move quickly, but I could probably spend a lot of time talking about these. But when it comes to juggling these roles, first of all, I certainly have not figured this out. I've not cornered the market on it. In fact, I've made far more mistakes than I want to admit. I've listened to elders speak, speaking from experience, and not only just hearing them speak, but just observation, just watching elders that are in my life. And I've heard a lot of good people say, a lot of good men say, it's God first, family second, church third. And I believe in that mantra. Matter of fact, when I became lead pastor, I told the church right up front, it's my relationship with God first, my family comes second, and the church comes third. I wanted that to be very prevalent from the very get-go. It's a principle I live by. But I've heard a lot of people say that, but I've also seen and witnessed and observed that if you take an inventory of some of the people who say this, if you take an inventory of their lives, that inventory would not back up that claim of God first, family second, church third. A lot of times it's in opposite orders. We like to say that, we know it's the right thing to say, but an inventory sometimes doesn't always prove that. And I just kind of settled in my heart, I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be that guy. So I've read books, I've listened to podcasts, I've looked through articles, I've done everything I can, because at the end of the day, I've only got so long to be the husband that God's called me to be, to hit the mark with my children, and to fulfill his will in my life. So I wanted to make sure I at least did something. I put some effort into doing this right. And really my best advice, and Brother Mark Brody may kind of be let down by all of this here, but my best advice is really a culmination of a lot of things. But when I boil it all down, the best advice I can actually give some of you today is something I learned as a small child. Now, as a small child, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. And one of the joys I had when I was a young child many years ago was watching the Bozo Show. Now, I know it's a little creepy now looking back, but I loved the Bozo Show. In particular, I loved the grand prize game. That was it for that show. And you probably see a picture of that now, but the children had to take ping pong balls, and there were buckets laid out, and all they had to do is get it in the bucket. And the more that you're able to do, the further the buckets got, and the more that you were able to put a ping pong ball in that bucket, the better the prize. That was the grand prize game. Now, allow me to explain. I'm not talking about ping pong balls and crazy clowns and everything like this, but we've all got multiple things that we are juggling. If we endeavor to juggle life well, we must daily invest in the buckets that are in front of you. Whatever buckets God has placed in front of you, we're all juggling life. And I found that if we focus too much on one bucket, the other buckets begin to suffer. They're not as full as the others. And when we begin to notice that, we run to that bucket. We start to focus time and invest there, but then another bucket starts to suffer. And before we know it, if you get into that race, you're running a rat race, and you're just trying to keep everything afloat. But I would say it's far better every day to invest in your job, in your church or ministry, your children. And if you have, this is a sub note, if you have multiple children, they all have different needs and different desires, and they're all loved differently. So your job, your church or ministry, your children, your wife. Now you've only got one wife, so that one's pretty easy. We'll talk about that in a moment. But also yourself, and that's where I want to start here is talking about yourself. When we talk about juggling and the balance act of work and church and life and children and everything going on, the first thing is yourself. We learn this when we fly in a plane. When they give you the emergency description there at the very beginning, what do they tell you to do? You take care of yourself first. Because if you're not where you should be, nothing else is going to fall into place. And I wonder how many of us have grown too accustomed to the acedia of our age, feeling this strange mix of busyness, running around, constantly moving, everything working at a rapid pace. You feel this strange mix of busyness, but at the exact same moment, you feel a whole bunch of lifelessness. We are always engaged with our thumbs, our smartphones, but we're rarely engaged with our own thoughts. We are forever downloading information and things that are out there. We're always getting information. We're always bringing it in, but we rarely get down into the depths of our own hearts and some of the things that are going on the inside. And in those down times, and this is why some people never want downtime. They've always got to have a party. They can never have a dull moment. That's because in those down times when nothing is scheduled, a lot of men begin to hear their hearts. They begin to think through the thoughts that are in their mind. And what that leads to is a large gaping hole. And men become terrified, realizing that we've filled our life full of things that have no bearing and don't really matter when it comes to eternity. That's acedia. It's a purposelessness disguised as constant commotion. And really the pace that we've all become accustomed to in this day and age in 2020. I mean, what a year this has been. But we've become accustomed to the pace of life that it has so many people, so many men, fathers, husbands, living in the red, where that needle is pushed to the max. And we've lived so long in the red that we've become accustomed to it. We've become accustomed to being maxed out, stressed out, worn out, at our wits' end at all times. And we start to believe that this is normal. And being in this constant commotion, yet possibly with everything going on, living with little to no purpose, mindlessly living day by day, never taking the time to invest, to toss a ball into a bucket and invest in all of the buckets that God has placed in front of you. If there's one gauge that you must live by as a husband, a father, a minister, a pastor, whatever the buckets are in your life, the one gauge that we must live by is rest. We've got to rest. National Sleep says 7 to 8 hours every night. You would do yourself well to get a dedicated sleep pattern, dedicated number of hours, and stick to it. You know, the fourth commandment, where we are to honor the Sabbath, this is the one we break the most. I heard Brother Shock say this. The fourth commandment is the one we break the most because we feel that it honors God in some way by spinning our wheels over and over and over and running ourselves ragged, trying to put out fires everywhere. The one gauge we must live by in ourselves, in men, is that we need rest. And I'm not talking about just physical rest. That's a very key component that I'm starting with here. But more than just physical rest, we need the kind of rest that only comes from a genuine relationship with God. Men, we must invest daily, every day, taking that time that God has placed in our hands, and we've got to invest it in prayer, in devotion, times of fasting, times of getting along with Him. Here's why. Because if you're not connected with God in a covenant relationship, you're never going to find soul rest. Too many men spinning their wheels, putting out fires here and there, and never taking the time to invest in themselves. Man, if you aren't investing in yourself, taking time daily to invest in yourself and in your relationship with Him, nothing else is ever going to fall into place. So please take time to invest in yourself. Number two, invest in your marriage. My wife will probably never see this devotion, um, and that's totally fine with me. I don't say this because I think she's going to watch it someday, but my wife is everything to me. I thank God for the day that she was born because she truly is my helpmeet. I wholeheartedly believe God fashioned her just for me. And I know a lot of you probably feel the exact same way. I just realized that God in his infinite wisdom, he knows more about my own weaknesses than I know. And in his infinite wisdom, looking down in my life, thank God for that, the grace and mercy. He looked down in my life and he fashioned a woman to be my wife, to be my helpmeet, to supplement my weaknesses. That doesn't mean I'm gonna like when my weaknesses are on display. No. As a matter of fact, I'm a guy just like you are, and I hate it when those times show up. But I realize they show up time and time and time again. But my wife is the greatest asset that I have in life. Outside of the help that comes from the Lord, she gives me more help than anybody else does. I've told many young people in youth ministry and in the time that I've been involved in that in my years, beyond a young person's decision to live for Jesus, the spouse that they choose, that is the most important decision that they will ever make. A wife has the potential to make or break somebody. I've seen it. We've all probably seen both sides where that decision made or didn't make someone. So my admonishment is simply this: take time daily to invest. Again, it's a bucket in front of you. It's what God has given to you. And you've got the resources in your hand to daily invest in that. Learn her love language. Read 5 love languages. Listen to it. Get the audiobook. Whatever you got to do, find out what her love language is and invest in that every single day. Because what trips your trigger may mean absolutely nothing to your wife. My wife can reach over, while we're driving, she can reach over and scratch the back of my neck or my, shoulder or something. I'm on cloud 9. That means everything to me. It doesn't mean a hill of beans to her. Now, if I'm coming home from church or coming home from this or that, and I go through and grab her a coffee and bring it home unannounced, unrequested, that puts her on cloud 9. But if she were to do that to me, again, I'm thankful for it, but it's not my love language. So find your wife's love language and invest in it every single day. It'll pay off. Number 3, invest in your children. I read a story. A young boy asked his father, "Dad, what is a Christian?" And the dad replied, "Well, a Christian is a person who loves and obeys God. He loves his neighbors and his friends, and a Christian even loves his enemies." The dad went on to say that a Christian is kind and prays a lot and gives to the church, and he looks forward to going to heaven and thinks that knowing God is better than anything on earth. And this father, given this great answer of what a Christian is, he looks at his son and said, Son, that is what a Christian is." And the boy thought for a moment and kind of pondered the answers that his dad had given him. He finally looks back and says, "Dad, have I ever seen a Christian?" Now, what a blow that would be. Proverbs says this, 22:6, "Train up a child in the way that he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from it." You probably know that scripture. The root word, though, there in train up, that in the Hebrew is a word used to describe the palate on the roof of your mouth. And looking at this and what that really means, train up, that Hebrew word there, Hebrew midwives who, after helping to deliver a baby, that midwife would dip her finger in a paste made of dates, and they would rub it on the gums and on the roof of that baby's mouth for one reason: to create a thirst and to start the instinct of feeding in that baby. Look, it's important that we are there for our children. It's important that you learn their love language. And if you've got more than one, they're probably all going to have different love languages. Loving them each in their own unique way. And I've asked myself many, many times when it comes to this balancing act, is what I'm about to do, who is it going to matter the most to for the longest. See, I may really need to complete a project at work. I may really need to run an errand. I may really need to do a number of things. There's all these, balls that we're juggling about. But every time I say yes to something, I'm saying no to something else. Now, that may be inadvertent. It may not be vocally said, but every time I say yes to something, I've got to say no to something else. And here's why I bring this up when it comes to our children, because I believe that this yes, no is probably most true when it comes to our children. They probably get, for whatever reason, the short end of the stick when it comes to the time and the resources that us as father have been given. Now, especially, when it comes to how my children see my relationship with the church and them. Now, I never, ever, ever want, now I'm talking about ministry here, but I never want my children to be resentful to the church, to be resentful for ministry or life in ministry. I never want my children to be resentful towards God because of my lack of discipline when it comes to the balancing act of life. It goes back to the, we're casting, we're investing into that bucket. We're throwing, us into that bucket. I heard T.F. Tenney, I believe it's T.F. Tenney, say this: the church must never become the mistress to the minister when it comes to our wives. And I want to take that and maybe take it a step further into our children, because the church must never become the thief of our time when it comes to our children. So I want my life and how I conduct everything, I want it to be an honor to God. And I want them to see my work on the job and ministry to my wife. I want them to see that and never become resentful because I've robbed them to invest there. It's a daily thing. I want my life and my example, I want that to create a thirst in the hearts of my children and for the things of God. So I've daily got to invest in those buckets. Let's talk about church and ministry. This bucket probably most closely aligns with my first point in the investment that you put in yourself, because any ministry that you do is nothing more than an overflow of your spiritual life. If you're not taking care of daily devotions and daily prayer times, your ministry is going to suffer. And then that has a domino effect, because if nothing else lines up with your relationship with God, nothing else is going to line up. So a few things that I do. The first thing I do every day is I read scripture. When the alarm goes off, I don't open email. I don't look at text messages. I'm not checking social media. I'm not looking to see who won last night's game. I'm not looking to news outlets. I'm not looking at stock prices. The very first thing I do every day is read scripture. And then I say a prayer for the day. It's not the only scripture I read today. It's not my only time of prayer, but that's the very first thing I do every day, is to look at scripture. It's just a habit that I've done. It's second nature to me now, because I realize that I have to invest every single day in my relationship with God. If ministry and church and pastoring and executive pastor, all, the different roles that I've been involved with, I realize that if I don't have my relationship with God right, ministry and church and all that doesn't really matter. It's not going to be as effective as what God intended it for it to be. Um, I think you'll find out if this is a daily routine, and it probably is for most of you, but it's out of the daily investment into ministry that the most fulfilling ministry really comes, because it's a daily investment. You're not just doing it Sunday to Sunday, Wednesday to Wednesday. It's a daily. And then your ministry, your life, your calling, whatever mode, whatever bucket is in front of you, though that'll become the most fulfilling times in your life when you've got everything right with Him. I've heard people say that the longer people are in ministry, the less fruit of the Spirit they display. And how sad is that? How sad is that the longer we're in ministry, the less fruit of the Spirit we display? God help us. For those who are serving in ministry, Lord, help us to minister, to serve, not just out of what I read this morning, but let it be out of the abundance of our daily investment and our daily investment in relationship with Him. I end with this. The fifth point here, the investment into your job, your work life, for those who are working a secular job. It was back in 1967 that a Senate subcommittee gave testimony And they claimed in 1967 that by 1985, the average work week for the average American would be just 22 hours a week. They argued in this Senate hearing that Americans would lead the industrialized world and have the least amount of hours worked annually. However, in 1967, the average worker worked 1,716 hours a year. In 2000, that number jumped to 1,878, almost 200 more hours annually that we work. I know what you're thinking. Now, this work from, job, this is an easy one because I daily invest in my job. I've got this one nailed down. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I'm there. I've got this one taken care of. And you're correct. But here's what I believe. If you're working a secular job, as I do, I believe that men of God ought to be the best employees at their place of employment. Men, when you're at work, give it everything you've got. Serve your employer with everything you've got, but then leave it there. You've invested what you've been asked to do. I'm not asking or admonishing anyone to shortchange your employer. You work with all you've got. You make the investment that you're being asked to, what you're being paid for, and then you leave the job there because you've got other buckets to attend to. If you're always accessible to your job, you're probably helpful to nobody, including your wife and your children and the saints that you serve. Do your job. Don't shortchange an employer. Give it all you've got. Invest daily in that bucket. But when that day comes to an end, walk away completely. If you're doing your job well enough, it'll be there the following morning, I promise you. Warren Buffett said this: the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. In other words, when you're at home and those work emails come to flying, just say no. Walk away from it. Invest in the other buckets. There's that time that you'll spend with this. I end tonight with this in this devotion. It's in a book called The Busy Christian's Guide to Busyness. The author, Tim Chester, lists some questions that may let us all know if we're doing a good job balancing life correctly. I think he lists about 12 questions, but I grabbed a few to close out tonight. And they're simply this: do you regularly work 30 minutes longer than you're contracted for? Do you regularly work more than what you're contracted for? If you're paid for 40 hours, are you regularly putting in 45, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours? You may not be balancing everything correctly. Number two, do you check your work and church emails at home during your family time? Are you always looking at that? Are you always waiting for that latest email? You may be out of balance. Has anyone ever said to you, this is a big one. Has anyone ever come to you and said, I didn't want to trouble you because I know how busy you are? That's a surefire red flag to let you know that you may not be balancing work, life, and church and family. You may not be balancing it correctly if people are saying that to you. And maybe even a step further, has your wife ever said that to you, or your children ever said that to you? Maybe out of balance. Number four, do family, friends, and maybe even the saints at church, do they ever complain over not getting to spend enough time with you? Do they ever say, man, I wish I could spend more time with you, but you're just so busy? Maybe out of balance. Number five, this is just a family one. Do you eat together as a family regularly? I know we've all got crazy schedules. I know we're all going a million different ways. You may have got kids going here, there, and everywhere, and you've got everything going on. But there's nothing more powerful than gathering around a dining room table and having a meal together, at least on a regular basis. Those are maybe just some questions that will turn your mind and maybe some devotion things that you need to think about and pray about some of these things. And there's other questions that could be shared and other things that you can think of that I'm probably not thinking of tonight. But these are just some ways to maybe let you know if you're balancing life correctly. I'll give you this admonishment. Don't wait for this all to magically come together. Sometime in the future. Well, when I get through this project, or if I just get through this phase, if I can just get through the adolescent or the toddler years, then it's going to be okay. Because here's what I've learned. It takes a lot of work to balance things correctly. You can't keep pointing to the future to make up for the past. You can't say, well, I'm going to do because I've not done it here. You can't always keep pointing to the future. And you're going to miss the bucket every now and then. I've missed the buckets in front of me more times than I want to admit. But that doesn't mean that you give up and you throw in the towel, because this is the grand prize game. And at the end of my life, when I stand before the Lord, my Creator, I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Because the Lord has blessed me with time, with a spouse, with 3 children, a ministry, a job. And when I get through and he looks at the buckets in my life, I want to hear him say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. I never want to be too busy to pursue God with my whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. Just a few quick resources, a couple of books that have really, really helped me. I've referenced even some of them tonight. Choosing to Cheat. It's an Andy Stanley book. It's a short read. It's easy. Order it on Amazon. It's probably less than $10. Choosing to Cheat. There's another book called Crazy Busy. Kevin DeYoung is the author there. Great book on just the busyness of life. One of the books as a parent that has meant the most to me is a book by Kevin Leman, What a Difference a Daddy Makes. Specifically the father to daughter relationship. Outstanding book on that relationship there. And I've already mentioned it before, the 5 love languages. That's just an all-time classic for any of this stuff. So I pray this helps. I pray something I've said. I pray, Lord, that something I've said helps somebody in the busyness. Men, you can do it. God's fashioned you. You've got everything inside of you you need to do it, to be the best father, the best husband, the best minister, the best employee that you can possibly be. You can do it. God bless you. Thank you again.
All right, everybody. We've just heard from Brother Greg Wilhelm as we're talking about this idea of work-life balance. And I've asked a couple guys to join me on this Zoom call to just kind of process what's been said, look into it, kind of see how it works in some of these guys' lives, and hopefully help you to figure out how we better put this into practice. So I have with me Brother Tom Mifflin. Tom is a member of the church at Apostolic Revival Church in Highland, Illinois, pastored by Brother Frank Crossan. And Tom owns and operates an exterior cleaning company, and that's in Highland. And he's been married for 15 years, has 3 sons, enjoys spending time with his family and growing his new business. And we're happy to have him with us. And then we have Brother Kyle Kelly. Kyle serves as the assistant pastor at Apostolic Salem, pastored by Brother Calvin Jean. And he's been married for 18 years to Amanda, has 2 children, Isaac and Cooper. And Kyle is involved in a number of things, including local community stuff like coaching, refereeing soccer. He's on the local YMCA board. He says he's also an aspiring home improvement expert whose motto is measure once and cut twice. And I know the feeling. I've been there as well. And I'm Mark Rohde. Tonight I'm serving as Illinois District Men's Ministries Director. But when I'm not doing that, I also get to serve the saints at Abundant Life in Lincoln, Illinois as their pastor. And I've had a roofing and exteriors company for 13 years. Been married to my wife, Holly, for 20 years. We've got 3 children together. And I do my best to juggle these hats and these balls in the air, so to speak, and sometimes feel like I'm dropping more of them than I'm keeping going. But guys, just like all men, I think we can probably safely say we've got our busy cards punched. That's for certain. But tell me what you think when you heard Brother Greg speak tonight. Tom, you want to start us off? Just what was an initial idea or two that came to you, or maybe what's one thing that stood out?
I heard a lot of great things. One thing that I took away from this was how he describes the 5th bucket, and being a great employee, dumping yourself into your work, and as a business owner, being able to shut that off at the end of the day and not bring that home with you. That's a challenge for me. I'm always researching or checking my emails or doing something with the business. So, and like you said, when you're saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to another. So by not being able to shut that off, it's losing time with my wife or my kids or, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I find it incredibly difficult to shut it off. Kyle, what about you? Just kind of initial thoughts, things that stood out most to you?
Yeah, I think they talked about reacting to deficits, again, with the 5 buckets, and how a lot of times you find yourself just trying to run from bucket to bucket to fill a little here, to put a little here. And really, I've found within myself what it ends up doing is it becomes less about the buckets and more about you trying not to make yourself feel guilty. So you give a little time to your family, give a little time to your work, give a little time to church, so you're not feeling guilty. It's just a cycle of guilt. And, it takes a lot of work. You obviously want to get to the place where you're not reactive to everything, but you're proactive. But like you just mentioned, it takes intentional hard work to set some boundaries in place to get to that point.
What do you do that works best for you as far as trying to intentionally invest in each bucket, as we're saying, as opposed to this scurry from bucket to bucket?
My work is tied up with, if you want to say, church ministry, because I'm full-time at the church. And so I wouldn't be as careful with my time. I would offer my time to other people. So, say, what works for you? When people would ask to meet or I'd have to do something, I'd say, well, you let me know what works for you. Well, it's being intentional, saying, I'm going to get back with you and I'm going to give you 2 or 3 times. You let me know which of those works for you. So I start to guard my time a little bit more so that I'm not just running back and forth.
Awesome. Good stuff. Tom, what about you? Thoughts on like how you intentionally invest in each of these areas or buckets, as opposed to just like whatever's most on fire? Is there any practical way that you go about doing that?
Gotcha. Yeah. There's always something going on. So I'm still learning the balance. I'm still learning how to better, fill each bucket. I don't have an answer for that right now. It's something that I'm learning, as we go. It's definitely a challenge trying to juggle a business, a wife, a family, all these things that you have going on. So learning as I go.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the story of all of us. One of the things that I've begun trying to do all the more is having a place, I'll say within my calendar, within my week, for each of these buckets, best I can. And of course, you know how it is. You can have the best laid plans and then one phone call blows it all up. But at the same time, I'm trying to get more and more structured to say, okay, on this afternoon, this is when I'm going to be working on A, B, and C. At this time, that's when I am with family. At that time, this is when I'm doing ministry stuff. And of course, all of that is somewhat fluid. But even knowing that it's going to change regularly, I've found that whenever I can start out by kind of setting those buckets, those priorities of, okay, here's what I'm doing at this time, I found that's been beneficial to me.
I think being realistic with expectations of the buckets, because, at different points in your life, some of those things are going to take higher priority. If you're starting a business, that's obviously going to take more of your time. If you have a new kid, that's going to, so I think being realistic about that there's seasons for things and that's okay, but it just can't stay that way. And then, also if you're married and especially if you're married, you don't have to let the whole family know, but especially your spouse, letting them know that, hey, I'm going to have to spend more time doing this, so that there's not that miscommunication as well.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Kyle, as far as being in a season of things. We have 3 children, so for the last 14 years, we've been nonstop children. We're getting to a point now, it's like we really need to take time, get away, focus more on our marriage, and spending time together as spouses, and not neglecting the kids, but kind of shifting that more towards me and her after all these years.
And along those lines, I'm trying all the more to be present, whatever it is I'm doing. And I'll tell you, man, that is a work in progress. But along this idea of like, if I'm doing work, man, it's all in for work. Or if I'm with family, I can't be checking the emails and just sending a quick response to a customer while I'm with family, trying to lock in. I've kind of bought in lately to this idea of multitasking really is kind of a farce. It really just doesn't work for the most part. And instead being intentional and focused here, and then I'm going to be intentional and focused giving my time there and trying to make that work all the more. Kyle, anything else that kind of stood out to you from Greg's teaching or ideas that it kind of gave you?
Greg mentioned, and Tom's also mentioned about, a positive no, which I don't know if Greg was referencing a book, but I've read a book, Power of a Positive No, and deciding what it is that you want for your life. And then you're going to have to say no to some things. And for some people, it's not hard to say no. They have to learn how to say no nicely. For other people, they have to learn how to say no just to begin with. And so I think, and that kind of goes in with all of it, the buckets and everything, but the learning what it's okay to say no to as a man, for your family, for your own walk with God, for your work, for whatever it may be, for your ministry, that some things you have to say no to. And that, it's kind of a tough lesson for some people, but not every open door means you got to walk through it.
This idea of, when opportunities come, you kind of build your life around, hey, seize that. And then to at some point have to say, okay, I'm backing off. I'm saying no to that so I can say yes to something better. It's one of those that, like, when he explains it, I go, yeah, you're right. And tomorrow it'll be a struggle all over again, trying to really make it happen. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that kind of hit me was some of the questions that Greg references at the end. And I forget the name of his author that he was pulling from, but some of the kind of busy type of questions. I'll be honest, though, the one that like has just kind of haunted me since listening to this is this idea of like people talking to you in terms of, well, I didn't want to bother you with this because I know you're so busy, or I didn't mention this earlier because I know you're covered up or you're busy. And when I heard him call that out, it was just like, because I hear that regularly. And honestly, probably at times as a man who wants to feel like he's really getting something done, I probably at times wear that as some kind of badge of honor. But it really points out to me that, like, no, that's no hero there. That means you are too busy or you're not balancing it right if people feel like they need to change how they access me because of how they perceive me as being so busy. Did that question that he asked or any of the other similar questions speak to either of you guys in any particular way?
Yeah, that was one that, I've probably heard before. And I think it's true, especially as men, because in our heads, it's pretty black and white. You're busy or lazy. You don't want to be lazy, but busy isn't, I don't know. I was trying to think of what a better opposite of busy would be, maybe content. It's a conscious effort, and it's a constant battle. With that question, how do you appear not busy?
Yeah, when I heard him, when he said, hey, I know you're busy kind of thing, first thing I thought of was my kids. I'm always on my phone doing something. And they're like, hey, Dad, hey, put your phone down. And, so being in the moment for me was something that I'm definitely taking away from this, being able to put the phone down, put the work aside, and just being present with the family. What have you found works for you as you try to continually make this balance of all the demands that are in your life? Is there one or two particular things that have really made the difference for you?
For me, first of all, it all starts in your relationship with God, because if that messes up, you'll find it start cropping up in other areas. So you'll be at work, get mad, and it's got nothing to do with work. It's got to do with your walk with God. Same in your family, everywhere. So that has to be the first of all, that has to be the priority. Second of all, constant evaluation, which some people don't like. Constantly evaluate and seeing where I'm at. If I get a negative response in anywhere, evaluating, is this me? Is there something that I'm doing? If my family, if it's off kilter, what do I need to do? So constantly evaluating that.
Yeah, for me, you just gotta know the buckets, know what you have to do, and make a plan on doing that. You need to identify what needs your attention, and then, if you don't identify that, then you're gonna miss your buckets. You're gonna miss out. So knowing what you need to do, and then making a plan to hit those goals each day.
And yeah, I've been trying lately to work in that area you're talking about, Tom. I feel like a lot of days I've run all day long, but I didn't get anything done that meant anything, or I didn't get anything that was really important to be done or whatever. And it's one thing to be busy. It's another thing to be effective, whether that's at work or in the home or at the church or whatever. And trying to make that plan and say, okay, what really matters if I get to the end of the week or the end of the day or whatever, and I've gotten what will have made the difference if I've got to spend time with my son, or if I got to really invest in the company in the way that I want, not just taking care of all the problems, or if I really got to minister to this person, and then setting that as the priorities and then executing on them. Has been, it's been a help for me, and I'm still at work on it.
As I get older, as you get older and you're playing the sports and the body just doesn't cooperate the way that it used to, but your mind is there. I've learned that you got to be a whole lot more intentional about what you do. So you really got to play the angles. You can't recover like you used to. You don't have the speed you used to. And I think in all this stuff with family, making a plan, doing it, whatever it is that works for you in your situation, you just got to be intentional. You got to plan it out. You got to be intentional, because nothing just happens.
All right. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your insight. And as we try to get these ideas and themes, not just in the realm of theory, but as we want to get them, into our hands and feet, and really be doing all that we can to be all that God has called us to be. Thanks again to Brother Tom Mifflin, Brother Kyle Kelly, and Brother Greg Wilhelm for their contributions to this session. I think one of the key things we've seen tonight on this topic is that it is important not to waste any of this gift of time that God has given us. Now, you've spent about 45 minutes watching this forum so far tonight. The question is, are you going to turn the video off and walk away and change nothing? That will only serve to have wasted this last bit of time you spent in front of the screen. Or instead, will you take a few minutes right now to process this teaching, either by yourself or with a group of guys, and determine what you can do differently because of what you have heard? That'll make this video a wise investment of your time. Now, you may never perfect the work-life balance, but I trust God has illuminated something you can do to bring it back toward, balance. If there's something that was particularly helpful about this session or any of the others, would you reach out to us and let us know? We'd love to hear from you. Tomorrow night, we wrap up with our fourth and final session of our online forum. Join us at 7 p.m. tomorrow as we talk with Pastor Steve Showalter about his book on overcoming pornography. Until then, I remind you that our goal is to come alongside men and help them be all that God has called them to be. May God bless.